the Georgetown Transportation Access and Circulation Study. My name is Ted Van Houten. I am the project manager for this project with DDOT. We have a number of DDOT subject matter experts and members of the consulting team on the call. So we'll go through the presentation, open it up to Q&A, and looking forward to hearing your questions. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so second public meeting. So we've been doing this project we had a public meeting last year. We've collected, gotten your comments. We've done some data analysis, and today we'll be sharing draft recommendations for the project for Georgetown. So before we get started, we want to give you just some information on how WebEx works in case those of you who aren't familiar with the platform or have questions, and let you know how the virtual meeting is going to work today. We should note that this is an open meeting, and as required by DC code, the meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to the public. Okay. The video file will be shared on the project team's website and DDOT's YouTube channel within 7 days after the meeting has ended. This meeting is being live streamed on DDOT's Facebook page. If you do not wish to have your voice recorded, please do not ask to speak. You may enter questions or comments in the Q&A, which we will review shortly. If you need technical support during this meeting, you can call 202-997-8354. Right. So using WebEx, everyone is on mute, and you cannot unmute yourself, but we can unmute you during the Q&A and comment period. And this helps ensure that the meeting runs smoothly and there aren't any disruptions during the presentation. To request to speak, you will need to use the raise hand feature, and we'll go over that. There are also closed captions available for the meeting, so you can click the CC icon to turn on closed captions. And then your video camera is off by default, and you will not be able to share video today. So if you have a question or comment that you'd like to speak, that you'd like to share, please raise your hand, and that indicates to us that you would like to speak. So to do that on the WebEx platform, you just click the raise hand icon that looks like the hand. You can also press Control-Shift-R key on your keyboard to raise your hand. And then if you join by a browser or mobile app, you can click the three-dot icon and select raise hand. And if you're dialing by phone, you dial *3 to raise your hand. If you have a question, we ask that you use the Q&A feature. So you'll click the three-dot icon, and you'll select Q&A, and then the Q&A panel will show up, and you'll in the ask field select all panelists. So the question goes to everybody. And then you type it in, you hit enter, and then we'll have your question and we'll provide an answer to you. If you're in by phone and you'd like to ask a question, you do have to use the raise hand function. So again, dial *3, and then you'll be able to you raise your hand, and then when we get to you, we'll indicate that you will unmute you, and we'll have you answer your question. Okay. All right. You can also you can also use the chat feature. So that's in the bottom right side of the window, the little talking box here. And that'll pop up, and you hit all panelists, type it in, and send it to us. All right. Just an overview before we get into the recommendations. The study purpose and objectives are Purpose of the study is to identify transportation initiatives that will enhance mobility, safety, and equity in Georgetown. Objectives: provide a balanced transportation environment for Georgetown residents, students, employees, and visitors. So however you interact with Georgetown, whether you live here or work here or study or visiting or shopping, we want to make sure that the transportation system, meets your needs as best as possible. Improving Georgetown streets and sidewalks to make them safer and more accessible. Safety, very important for us here at DDOT. Accessibility, also an important component of the project. Maintain the historic character of the neighborhood, of course, very important for Georgetown. And then promoting sustainable transportation options. So this is our project timeline. We kicked off the project last year at about this time with issues identification, and then we had our first public meeting in May of last year. And then since in the fall, we did additional public outreach. We had a survey, we had some stakeholder meetings. And then after that, later in the fall and early winter of this year, we had some concept development. And where we are now, this is where we are now, where we're presenting draft recommendations to you. We had the in-person meeting at St. John's Church yesterday. And then we're here with you today virtually. And then there will be additional public outreach after this meeting. And then after that, we will have a final meeting next month where we report back on what we heard from you. And then we'll complete the study, produce a final report and final recommendations in June. So as far as what community engagement we've done today, we had our first public workshop last year. We've had a number of walking tours, both with individuals and with our community advisory committee group. We've had a number of stakeholder meetings, and then we've also met with our community advisory committee, which has members from the ANC, the Citizens Association of Georgetown, the Burley Citizens Association, the university, and a number of other community stakeholders. And we saw a number of them yesterday, and I've seen a number of them, their names in the participant list. So they've been really great to work with and really helpful to shape this project. So I do want to make sure I'm thanking them for all their input today in the meeting. And then we've done a number of direct outreach through emails, through our website, and through tools on the website. And we've had, for the survey that we had last fall, we've had over 1,400 survey responses. Over 1,000 people have participated in the project. And then we also had a clickable map on the website where you could kind of click on a location and tell us your comments. And those location-based comments, we had over 300 of those. So before we get into the recommendations, we do want to kind of ask some questions that we think some of you may already are thinking about, as far as how the draft recommendations will affect parking in Georgetown. The study didn't include a full parking analysis or a full parking, survey or kind of an inventory of parking throughout the whole neighborhood. That's not something that we did. But we did think about how the recommendations would impact parking. And we want to be upfront with you about if a recommendation would result in a loss of a legal parking space. We want to present that information to you today. So we do have that. But for the most part, the recommendations as implemented wouldn't make any parking changes to existing parking. And again, the few that do, we'll share that with you. Do the draft recommendations address bus and bicycle infrastructure? As far as bus, our bus team, and we have some more information later in the presentation about this, but our bus team is going to be doing a bus priority project in Georgetown. That should kick off either later this year or early next year. And we have people on the call from our bus team who can provide more information on that if there are questions about that. As far as bicycle infrastructure, our bicycle team is going to be doing a citywide strategic bicycle plan throughout the whole throughout not just the whole neighborhood, but the whole district. So you won't see any bike recommendations in our study because we didn't want to get ahead of the work that they're going to be doing. But we do have a representative from the bike team who's happy to talk more about that if there are any questions. So as far as how the study's recommendations will be funded and implemented, as far as funding, we do have a pot of money that we can draw from to use for some of these recommendations. There are also DDOT teams, civil engineers, traffic engineers, others that kind of get a pot of money every year, and they can use that for projects citywide, and they frequently will come around and see what projects that come out of stuff that other DDOT projects and DDOT plans that they can put in their work plans. So that is another option and tool that we have to implement things that will come out of the study. And I will say that there may be some concerns about some of these, and that's exactly why we're here today. That's exactly why I have colleagues on the call and the project team. We're all here to answer your questions, to hear what concerns or questions or comments you have about the recommendations. We want, if there's any concerns or comments, we'll work through them with the community before anything is implemented. We've also heard a lot of questions about other things that aren't really covered by this study, that aren't in the scope of the study, but we do want to provide some answers to those. So we've heard some questions about large projects that have been talked about in the neighborhood, Georgetown Metro Station, Georgetown Gondola, changes to the Wedgeworth Thruway. All of those are so big that they really would require their separate project that would just be focusing on those. So you won't see anything like that in this study. Changes to existing legislation or policy, those are things we typically apply citywide. You won't see anything like that in the study. Maintenance of existing infrastructure, if you have a maintenance request, if there's a sign that needs to be replaced, if there's a crosswalk that needs to be restriped, if there's a pothole, if there's anything like that that is just maintenance, we would ask that you file a 311 request to address those maintenance issues. You won't see anything like that in our recommendations. Enforcement requests, we do have one place where we've included, where we've coordinated with our automated enforcement team, which is the traffic cameras. But in general, those would be requests that would be referred to MPD or DDOT's automated enforcement team for the traffic cameras. Electric vehicle infrastructure or curbside charging stations. DDOT has a program that addresses those issues, so you won't see any recommendations about adding curbside charging in this study. But again, if you're interested in that, we can refer you to that program that works on that. Requests to add more frequent or new bus services. Those would be referred to either WMATA or the DC Circulator team. Management of curbside parking. We'd refer you to DDOT's curbside management team, and I believe we have a member of that team on the meeting, and so we can refer you to that person. And then expansion of the bike lane or trail network. Again, our actors transportation team is going to be doing a citywide strategic bike lane project. So we don't have anything like that in this study, and that would be part of the strategic plan. Okay, so we are going to dive right in and go into the recommendations for the project. So we'll go through all of these, and then we'll have a few more slides at the end, and then we'll get to your comments and questions. Okay, so the first recommendation is for 28th and 27th Street, kind of between M and P, and then 27th between Olive and P, and then also the intersection of 28th and P streets. So the issue we heard is concerns from residents about speeding drivers, disregard for stop signs and crosswalks. Drivers aren't stopping for pedestrians at intersections. And then we heard some concerns about conflicts with larger vehicles at 28th and P. So our proposed improvement is to implement a new striping plan with signs and flex posts on these streets. And the impact of that would be improve pedestrian visibility, provide traffic calming, and to improve safety on these streets. I won't say go through the cost estimate on all of these, but we have provided a draft cost estimate of what it would take. And this is just materials, what it would take to implement all the recommendations. If there are questions about that, we're happy to answer them, but I won't go through that on every single one of these. Okay. Next recommendation is Olive Street between 27th and 28th, and also this intersection of 28th and Olive. We heard concerns about speeding drivers, especially at night. There's a restaurant down here that some activity around that has caused some concern for the community, and then disregard for stop signs and crosswalks. And then our recommendation is to implement the new striping plan on this street with signs and flex posts, and then to install double-sided stop signs to reinforce the visibility of the stop signs to help to improve pedestrian visibility, and then providing traffic calming. Bank Alley Northwest, the issue here is really the main issue here is the intersection with M Street here. Drivers turning, especially drivers making left turns. There's a lot of conflicts at that intersection, and when drivers are making this left turn, they can increase congestion on M Street. And then this wide alley entrance, drivers are able to turn a little faster because of that wide alley entrance. So our proposed improvement is to ban all left turns at the intersection of the alley and M Street, and then to enforce that with improving signs and markings, and then put curb extensions at the alley entrance to shorten the crosswalk for pedestrians, and to have drivers who are making that turn to make that turn slower. And the impact is to reduce the crash risk at that intersection. Wisconsin Avenue, Reservoir, 33rd. We heard from residents as far as concerns about drivers speeding, especially drivers coming southbound or downhill on Wisconsin, and then violating the no turn on red signs that are here, and then other pedestrian driver conflicts. So our proposed improvement is to improve the intersection signal coordination, to update the sign quest to the sign locations, and then add automated enforcement. We have talked to the team, and that is something that they are working on. And then this intersection Wisconsin and 33rd, put markings and flex posts here so that drivers making that turn have to do that a little slower. Wisconsin and P. So we've heard conflicts between drivers and pedestrians, and there is some existing parking, specifically this spot right here, blocks pedestrian visibility and kind of makes it a little hard for some vehicles to make this turn. So the recommendation would be to improve signs, and then to remove that one parking spot that's right here for those turning vehicles, and improving sight lines. So this is 29th K and the Rock Creek Parkway exit. So the issue here is drivers ignoring this left turn restriction on 29th Street, and then some unclear signage, and then other intersection conflicts. So the recommendation here would be to restrict left turns. I mean, they're already restricted with the sign, but we would enforce that with additional markings, and then flex posts across the intersection to block that movement, and then updating signs and markings to match that intervention. Next one is O and Potomac. So the issue here is O is a cobblestone paved street, which is great from a historic perspective, and but the markings that we use don't quite hold on cobblestones as well as they do on asphalt. And then there's also pickup drop-off safety concerns from Hyde Addison School, which is right here. So our recommendation is to update signs on the intersection, to improve the visibility of the stop here, and then install markings on Potomac Avenue to shorten this crossing distance. There's also an existing Safe Routes to School project, and we have our staff member from the Safe Routes to School team who's working on that project as well. Yeah, so we've got the school here, and we've got the church here as well, where we had our meeting yesterday. So this is a crucial location for safety. Q and 32nd. The issue here is 32nd comes kind of downhill at the intersection with Q. It's a relatively narrow street, and the buildings are really close to the intersection. This really narrow sidewalk, so you've got kind of restricted visibility for people coming southbound on 32nd Street. So our recommendation is to update signs and markings, and then add curb extensions with flex posts around this intersection. Yes, okay. Our next one is the Key Bridge ramp onto the Whitehurst Freeway. So northbound drivers coming on the Key Bridge, making that turn onto the Whitehurst Freeway to go eastbound. There's a crosswalk there, and drivers are making that turn too fast and not seeing the pedestrians. So we would add kind of larger flex posts. There's kind of a specific type of flex posts that we have, a specific brand. It's not your average flex post, but we put that to at that ramp entrance to make sure that drivers who are making that turn have to slow down to make that turn, and that increases crosswalk visibility and makes them more likely to see pedestrians who are trying to make that crossing. M and Wisconsin Avenue, significant traffic congestion. This is the single busiest intersection in the neighborhood. So there's brief crossing periods for pedestrians, narrow sidewalks, and then there's a lot of turning movements at this intersection. So we are looking at a pedestrian-only phase, what some of you may know as a Barnes dance. So that is when the traffic signal, all car traffic stops, and pedestrians can cross in any direction. So we are evaluating that. We have done some evaluation on that. There are some pretty significant trade-offs to doing that. So that's something that we are continuing to evaluate, and it will be continued to evaluate in the bus project. But it is something that we have done some analysis on. Installing curb extensions, and then making some adjustments to bike and scooter parking south of the intersection to improve visibility, and then expanding bus stop zones. Wisconsin Avenue and N. The issue here is drivers turning right from Wisconsin don't always yield to pedestrians. So we would update signs and markings, realign crosswalks, and then there's a streetery at this intersection that we would need to pull back just a bit to increase visibility at the intersection. 35th and Dent. We've heard concerns about drivers not yielding to pedestrians, the need to improve sight lines at the intersection, and then you've got a number of kind of nearby schools. So there's a higher proportion of children present accessing those schools. So this is a key location for that, and you'll see that in some of the other ones coming up. The recommendation here is to install additional signs, markings, flex posts, relocate the bus stop, looking at evaluation for a signal or a hawk or a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which we've put throughout the city, which is another thing in our toolbox. So evaluating the feasibility of that. And then Installing the crosswalk on the north side. Currently, there's only, to cross 35th, there's only the one on the south side, as you can see here. So installing that north side crosswalk, which does require us to relocate a street light, but yeah. And this is another one that involves a parking impact. Because of relocating the bus stop, that does require us to repurpose 3 curbside parking spaces that exist now. 35th and T. So this is another issue is drivers not yielding to pedestrians in the crosswalk. This is another one near a school. This building is for those of you not familiar, this is Hardy Middle School. So our recommendation here is to install additional signs and markings, add a crosswalk here on the south side, and then relocate the bus stop from the near side here, from this side here to the south side of the intersection. And then also install curb extensions on this east side of 35th Street so that people aren't kind of parking right here, which is right in the intersection next to the school. So we put a curb extension kind of all the way across here to make sure that those crossings are a little shorter and there aren't people parking in the intersection. And again, moving this bus stop requires us to remove or repurpose 2 parking spaces, which are right here. Reservoir Road and 36th Street. Again, another one with there's a school right here. There's a school right here. Reservoir is one of the busier roadways in Georgetown. So the recommendation here is to install signs alerting drivers to the pedestrians, update pavement markings, and then evaluating this intersection for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is a tool that we use to improve drivers stopping at these crosswalks for pedestrians. 28th M and Pennsylvania. This is a major gateway intersection for the neighborhood. This is kind of right on the east part if you're coming over from Foggy Bottom. This is one of the intersections that you'll use to enter the neighborhood. So issue we've heard here is traffic congestion and safety and crashes in the intersection. So our proposed improvement is to redesign the intersection to reduce some of these conflict points, make sure that drivers who are making turns do so slower. So update and add signs, markings, flex posts. And also, this is one where we can add some parking on this north side of M Street. So this is the recommendation where we can actually add some street curbside parking in the community. So that was our shorter term recommendations. We've got a couple of circulation recommendations. So we'll go through those. So these are the locations where we are recommending conversions to one-way, or we looked at a conversion to one-way, or in these streets, we looked at a potential change of existing traffic patterns. So this recommendation, this is N Street between Wisconsin Avenue and 30th Street. So the issues here are double parking and block traffic from loading activity, especially close to Wisconsin. We've got some businesses here. We have heard from some residents on this 3100 block who have requested that we convert N Street or at least their block to one-way westbound. And we did receive an ANC resolution about removing the parking meters. This is mainly a residential street, but when you get closer to Wisconsin Avenue, there are some curbside, or there are some parking meters here that are existing. So we did look, at converting this street to one-way, converting N Street, these 2 blocks to one-way westbound. We looked at it and the analysis didn't support it. So the recommendation is to install updated signs and markings to improve safety. And we also are going to be, per the ANC resolution that we received, we are going to be removing the remaining parking meters on the south side of N Street, and are going to be installing a loading zone. And our curbside management team is working on the notice of intent for that as we speak. So impact is to improve safety and visibility. And again, this is the last of the recommendations that has a parking repurposing. It's those 4 metered parking spaces, again, will be converted to a loading zone. 33rd, 34th, and 35th Street between Wisconsin and M Street. We heard a lot of comments from residents about excessive congestion, especially during rush hours, especially during the PM rush. For drivers, instead of going on Wisconsin Avenue and then making the turn on M to get to the Key Bridge, they're driving through these streets to get on M to get to the Key Bridge. So we did analyze some changes to existing traffic patterns here, and the analysis didn't support making any changes to existing traffic patterns, but it did recommend a number of improvements at several intersections, updating signal timing at M and 33rd, installing additional signs at M and 34th, and then adding markings and flex posts at Wisconsin and 35th to slow drivers making that turn from Wisconsin on the 35th. The analysis we did here also supported the restriction on all left turns at M and Bank Alley. The analysis we did also supported that, and it also supported slowing the turn from Wisconsin onto 33rd Street. Next recommendation is S and T streets in Burleaf. So we've heard concerns about narrow two-way streets with parking on both sides. And some circulation issues here. Also, there's a bus on T Street that could be improved by a one-way conversion. So our proposed improvement here is to convert T Street between 35th and 37th to one-way westbound, and then make S one-way eastbound. And again, that would reduce conflict points at these intersections because there's only one movement instead of two, and then improve bus operations on T. 28th and 29th Street, this is our last recommendation. Between M and P, we had concerns about speeding drivers and some poor circulation on M Street. So the recommendation here is to convert 29th Street to one-way southbound and 28th Street from M and P to one-way northbound. So doing this would, the recommendation here could improve circulation, but also reduce conflict points at the intersections, especially at M Street. The rush hour restrictions, since the pandemic, the rush hour restricted parking on M in Wisconsin and Georgetown have been suspended. And I know there's been some installations that have gone in there, and it's been a temporary situation. And then, so through this study, we looked at can that temporary situation be permanent? So we analyzed a permanent removal of the rush hour restrictions, and the analysis showed that removing the rush hour restrictions has little impact to the network, but it has a big impact on crashes. That since the rush hour restrictions have been suspended on M in Wisconsin and Georgetown, crashes have dropped by 60%. DDOT is going to initiate a longer-term project, which will be led by our bus team, that will explore corridor-wide changes to M in Wisconsin. And this can include expanded sidewalks, like expanded permanent sidewalks, bus lanes, bike lanes, and then also looking at the streeteries. And even though our bus team has led and has implemented multimodal projects on M Street Southeast in Navy Yard, In the Navy Yard neighborhood, for example, our bus team did implement a bus priority project, and that also included bike lanes. So just because the bus team is leading a project doesn't mean that we can't deliver other improvements as well. So also I mentioned the pedestrian-only phase, or the barn stance in Edmond, Wisconsin. That will be considered alongside other potential changes as part of the upcoming bus priority project. And both M Street and Wisconsin Avenue are on DDOT's bus priority network. And that project is anticipated to start in late 2024, so later this year or early next year. And this is the data that shows the blue is before the pandemic, before the rush hour restrictions were implemented, before they were suspended, and then after they were suspended, and then after the curb extensions went in. So this shows this is the big takeaway where the crash rate has dropped from almost 250 to down about 100. So this is a big impact for safety here. And then also injury crashes, pedestrian crashes, and bicycle crashes have all decreased. So tonight, the next steps tonight, we'll be asking you to share your ideas. We'll be moving to the Q&A section of our meeting in just a bit. Throughout this month, we'll be doing continued outreach on draft recommendations. We have a survey, and we're happy to have continued conversations with you. We would ask by April 30th that any comments are sent to us so that we can have a bit of a pencils down moment, and so we can take everything we've heard and review everything and incorporate comments to finalize recommendations. We'll do that in early May, and then we'll be back with you in middle to late May for the final public workshop for this project, and we'll be presenting final recommendations, and then we'll finalize the study in June and provide a final report. So I should note, after the study concludes, the study will conclude, the study team, our consultants will move on to other projects, but DDOT will remain, DDOT will remain to continue to work with residents, to continue to work through comments or concerns on the recommendations, and there will be additional opportunities to review and comment before anything is implemented. If anything requires removal of illegal parking space or a change in traffic patterns, so a one-way conversion, banning a left turn, anything like that, we are required to follow the notice of intent process. That is a formal way for DDOT to formally notify the ANC and the residents that we intend to do something. And it gives them a formal comment period, and we're happy to have a meeting before an NOI goes out, so that the residents kind of know what's coming, and we can kind of time that. If the ANC wants us to wait a little bit so that they can have 2 meetings during the NOI comment period, we're happy to work with the ANC and residents on timing of notice of intent. And then again, I mentioned our bus priority project that will be kicking off in late 2024 and early 25. So we do have a survey. The survey that is the QR code. So if you got your phone, you can pull that right now. Also, if somebody could drop the link to the survey in the chat for everyone. So that will be open until April 30th, and that asks you to provide your comments on the recommendations. It also asks you if there are ones that you really think that we should move forward on first. It gives you an option to do that. So the survey is there. We also have these Title VI form. So because DDOT receives federal funding, we need to ensure that all of our programs and activities and public meetings are conducted in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which ensures non-discrimination. This is a tool that we use to make sure our meetings are as good as they can be, and we do use this feedback to improve our meetings for the entire agency. So I should note you're not required to provide this to fill this out, but we do really recommend that you do it, and we really would ask if you would. I know this is 2 surveys that we're asking you to do, but this one is specifically about the recommendations, and then this one is more general about the project. So we really would ask you to do both. We really appreciate the time that you would take if you do both. And also, when the meeting closes down, you'll get another link to do this. All right, so we will open this up to question. Well, before we do, I want to turn to Christian from our project team to provide some closing remarks before we open it up for question and answer. So Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ted. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christian Klansky. I'm Director of Strategic Communications at Link Strategic Partners. We are a social impact and community engagement firm headquartered in DC. And I think I've had the privilege of meeting many of you before, so it's great to be with you tonight. I just want to give a couple of notes on feedback and what we're going to do over the next 45 minutes or so. So over the last year, we have been proud to learn with all of you. We've had so many great conversations. As Ted said earlier, we've had literally thousands of ideas and comments to incorporate into these draft recommendations. So we're asking for your feedback tonight on, I want to emphasize this, draft recommendations. These are not the final recommendations. After tonight, we'll take all the feedback that you provide us, all the questions that you have, and use them to refine the recommendations. So there are 3 opportunities in the next few minutes here. One is if you have questions, please put them in the question, and you don't feel like raising your hand and speaking, please put them in the question and answer panel. If you haven't located that yet, because I know it's tricky to find, look in the bottom right corner of your screen, and there are 3 little dots next to the chat bubble. There's a question and answer panel there. That's the best place to put questions if you don't want to raise your hand, and somebody from the DDOT or project team will answer the questions. I know there are some there that haven't been answered yet, and we will get to those out loud here. Please do take time over the next month to take this survey. The QR code's on the screen right now. This is an in-depth opportunity to provide us really clear feedback about any or all of the recommendations, whatever is most important to you. This will remain open for the rest of the month, so don't feel obligated to do it right now, but it's a really great tool. And then we'll have questions and answers right now. So our opportunity here is to really build on the hard work that's been done so far and to improve these draft recommendations. So before I start taking questions, 4 quick comments. Please be brief. There are a lot of folks who have a lot to say, and we want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. 2, please be constructive. A lot of hard work has gone to get us to this point. We want to be very respectful of that work. 3 is be specific. So if you love something, tell us why. If you don't love something, tell us why. The more specificity you can give us, the better the recommendations can be in the end. And last is, be kind. If you were with us last night, you heard me say this, but the world's really an unpleasant place these days, and this is really a great space to be positive and constructive, because this project's really about improving Georgetown. So if we haven't gotten to your question yet, I'm going to go back and forth between calling on folks who have their hands up. I'll call on you in the order that the hands have been raised, and then reading out loud some of the questions that are in the chat that haven't yet been addressed by a project team member. And finally, if I call on you and I mispronounce your name, please both correct me and forgive me. I would very much appreciate that. So first I want to ask a question from the question and answer panel that hasn't been responded to yet. So Ted, if you could talk about DDOT's toolbox and whether it only supports adding extra large flex posts to the Key Bridge ramp to the Whitehurst, because that seems like an inadequate way to make that crossing feel safer.
I mean, DDOT has a number of things in our toolbox. We've got a number of signs and markings. We do have to make sure that they follow federal standards with the manuals that we have, and then DDOT's own design standards. But there's a number of things that we can do. As far as the Key Bridge recommendation, which again, I'm happy to flip around to recommendations if somebody has a question and, wants me to pull the slide back up, I can do that. But these are, not your average flex post. It's something called quick curb, and I don't think quick and or curb are spelled how they're normally spelled, but that's the specific tool that we would propose to use there. So it's a pretty hefty flex post. But with all these recommendations, I mean, we're here today to hear your comments and your questions, and if you think something is not quite right, or you think that there's something that we're missing, that's exactly why we're here, and we'll be taking the time in the next months to go through all the comments we received, and incorporate and refine the recommendations. So yeah, that's
great. Thanks, Ted. All right, Jared, I see you have a question that hasn't been answered in the chat, and you're the first to have your hand up. So I'm going to call on you, please. Let me see. I just asked you to unmute there. All right, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, awesome. Yeah, so I was just, to be specific and to be brief, as you noted, I want to first say that this is an amazing study, and you guys are doing great work. As somebody noted in the chat, the city improves in terms of transportation, bicycle safety, pedestrian safety, with every one of these projects, and that's really important. One thing that I wanted to kind of highlight is that I was really disappointed that the study didn't seem to look at a potential extension to the streetcar to Georgetown. I mean, I see that as being probably the single most impactful transit access and circulation piece to the puzzle that Georgetown could do. And with the Ward 7 extension being included in the 2026 capital improvement plan, it seems like it would make sense to start planning for a westward extension at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks for that question and comment. I should note that the extending the streetcar to Georgetown would be a pretty big project. So that is something that this project just wasn't scoped to consider. The recommendations, as you saw, that are coming out of this are much smaller in scope than that would be. So we certainly hear you, but that was not included in this project, because really it would need its own effort where you're just focusing on that. But thank you.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Jared. Mark, I see your hand. I'm going to ask you to unmute here.
Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can, yeah. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Well, first, thank you for a very thoroughgoing study and all of the research and comments you sought. I want to endorse particularly one of those recommendations, which is to make part of 30th Street, and as I recall, also 29th Street one way. I would like many more of the north-south streets to be in that mode, but this will be a big difference, because it's become hell to try to pass on our streets, particularly the north-south ones. The east-west ones, not so bad, because, for instance, R, Q, P, they're pretty wide, but the north-south ones are narrow. And in an age when more than 50% of all new vehicles are SUVs, and you get SUVs parked on either side of the street, and then you try to pass a car, one of which may be a SUV, it is a nightmare. And it's particularly difficult or challenging for those of us a little bit long in the tooth who are particularly prudent to try to avoid sideswiping somebody on the passenger side while passing someone. So I have heard only two objections to one-way streets. One is that it's a little bit of a bother to have to go around the block to get to your place. I don't think that's valid as compared to the advantages. Parking would be exactly the same. You have it on both sides of the street. The one objection I do take seriously is people are afraid it would result in people speeding up on the streets if they were one way. I have two comments. Number one, in fact, people speed up now because if you get to an intersection and you see the block ahead is clear, you race up that intersection, that block to get to the next intersection so you don't have to pass a car in the middle of the block. And secondly, if speed really is a concern, that could be settled quite easily simply by putting speed bumps in the roads, as we already have in parts of Georgetown. And I'm thinking in particular 31st Street between, I think, P and O, or O and Q Street. And those are very effective. And it's a cheap solution if speed is the major objection. So I hope you would, I congratulate you on that recommendation for at least one-way streets to a certain extent in the program. And I hope if the experiment proves useful, it might be expanded at some point in the distant future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that comment. I will say that we have heard a lot about the one-way streets, about this one and some of the other ones. I mean, you know, it's a significant change, so it makes sense that that's something that a lot of people have a lot of comments about. As far as other streets that you think aren't included, there is a question in our survey, which I'm gonna plug again. There is a question in the survey that specifically asks if there is a location where we're not making a recommendation that you think we should, that you think we've missed. There is a question in the survey that asks that. So those are definitely comments that we'd like to get as well. You know, if we missed something, and you think we missed something, we want you to let us know. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Ted, and thank you, Mark. I'm going to call on Matthew Gordon, and then I'll ask a few more questions that are in the chat, or Q&A function, rather. Matthew, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. I wanted to discuss and ask a few questions in reference to the Burleigh 35th Street draft recommendation. Yeah, the 35th and T Street Northwest. And Ted, thank you. I know I've sent you an email earlier, and I appreciate the reply. I just wanted to understand a little bit better some of the thought process around the specific proposal of moving the bus stop to the southern end of the intersection. Just wanted to hear a little bit about that thought process, and then I wanted to share some of my insights and perspective on that.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the recommendation as far as the bus stop piece of this would be moving the bus stop from what we call the near side of the intersection. So near side is when the bus stops before going through the intersection. So we move it from the near side to the far side, and the far side is what we call when the bus stops after going through the intersection. So we'd move it from here to here, because generally far side stops are safer. Pedestrians are crossing behind the bus instead of in front of the bus. You know, when you have pedestrians crossing in front of the bus, you know, you may have a driver that wants to get around the bus that's stopped, and they zoom around. And if you think of, you know, school buses, you're not supposed to pass a stopped school bus. They have the little arm that comes out with the stop sign, if you remember. Metro buses don't have that. So generally we do, far side buses are safer because pedestrians are crossing behind the bus instead of in front of the bus. But, you know, every location is different, and, you know, we're happy to continue to have a conversation with you and your neighbors and continue to look at it and continue to comments. And, you know, it may turn out that you know, after all that consultation, it makes sense to keep the bus stop where it is. I would say that we wouldn't move the bus stop unless we also put in this crossing on the south side here, which again, we're also recommending. I should note for really any of these recommendations, I know it hasn't come up yet, but we have heard some comments about, you know, flex posts, for example, and, you know, people don't like flex posts. They, you know, for aesthetic concerns, or, you know, some people say that, you know, they they're always knocked back down, which, isn't always the case. I know some locations with Tuxposts that have stayed up pretty long. But we certainly do acknowledge and hear those concerns. So I think with a lot of these things, if there are comments where, I like the recommendation, but I don't like that one piece of it, that's something that we can certainly consider. And, some of these things could be when they're implemented, through conversations with residents and other community stakeholders, we could determine that, they're implemented slightly differently from how we're presenting to you today, or, maybe not at all, depending on that continued coordination. So yeah, we're happy to have those conversations, and we want to make sure we're getting as many comments as possible. So thank you for that comment today.
I appreciate that perspective, Ted. Thank you. And also just to echo what the previous speakers have said, I really do appreciate this study and all the work you have put in. I think these are fantastic ideas, and the way you're engaging and coordinating with the community is great. Just to add a little more specifically, and I'll be brief because I want to give others the opportunity, and I'll include more details in my survey response. But as someone who spends 90% of my life within probably 45 feet of this intersection, I will say it is extremely complex and poses a lot of risk and danger for both pedestrians and vehicles traveling through. It's a unique combination because it's not only a thoroughfare of folks driving through 35th Street coming down off Wisconsin to either leave the city or go to the many schools or destinations on the west side of Georgetown, but the intersection itself is a destination as the primary drop-off point of Hardy Middle School. And so because of that, during peak hours, you have a lot of what I would say unpredictable car activity and movement, starts and stops, vehicles that are blocking portions of the road. In addition to that, this section of the neighborhood is also slightly unique in that a lot of the homes in this area don't have alleyway access or off-street parking access. And so they rely heavily on utilizing this on-street parking that's directly in the intersection and very close to where these bus stops would be. So when the drop-offs happen for school, or when delivery vehicles or work vehicles come into the neighborhood, they have nowhere to park. So they end up, leveraging the empty space close to the intersections or sitting in the bus lanes. It even happens today where the current bus stops exist. And when that happens, you start to get backups and congestion, and it really compounds all the way up 35th Street. It compounds on a lot of the cars that travel through T Street, turning right to go southbound on 35th Street. And it creates a lot of confusion and uncertainty and unpredictability for pedestrians who are crossing the street there. And then on top of that, I would say the removal of the 2 parking spaces as well, while it seems small, I think would only compound to the issue because, that's creating huge distress and disadvantage for residents who rely on street parking, many of which have young families or are elderly. A lot of residents in this exact area as well have electric vehicles in which, they try to get parking spaces in front of their home so they can charge up their cars and actually leverage them. By removing 2 spaces, you're going to create now additional cars on the road looking for and competing for spaces, and again, adding to that congestion. And then one more just simple point, and I'll share the rest of my thoughts in the survey, is in peak hours, and one of the things I know is one of the goals of the study here and some of the implementations is to improve the flow of traffic. Just the very nature of moving the bus stop to the southern end of this intersection introduces a second stop for the bus. Right now, it's the stop sign that it stops at on the north side of 35th Street is the bus stops. The bus only stops once. In the proposed implementation for this piece, it would be stopping there, passing through the intersection, and stopping again. When you combine that with what I was mentioning about the cars being parked in bus stops and whatnot, there's a high likelihood, and it already happens today on a daily basis, of the bus itself or cars coming in behind the bus or pedestrians trying to navigate around the bus, blocking the intersection, sitting in crosswalks and creating additional congestion that'll compound, above 35th Street, and then create an uneven flow as you move more southbound. So just wanted to share those perspectives. Again, really appreciate you taking the time to hear everyone's thoughts, and I'll be sure to fill out the survey and include my additional thoughts.
Thank you, Matthew. We very much appreciate the specificity and definitely look forward to the survey responses because that'll be super helpful. I want to emphasize two quick things. So I'm seeing a lot of comments come through in the chat, but if you'd be able to ask the questions in the Q&A function, which again is in the bottom right corner, if you click on the three dots, that way when your questions are answered, others can see that. And also just in the spirit of time, because we have about 20 minutes left here and we'd be happy to stay a few minutes longer. Just want to be quick here. So I see a few more hands. David, I do see your hand there. I'm going to ask just a couple of quick questions from the Q&A that haven't been answered yet. So Ted, recommendation 22, can you elaborate on the analysis and thought process with the 28th Street northbound transition? Is it a pathway for a future potential bike lane, or are there parking spot impacts?
As far as a potential bike lane, I think that's something that we would pass on to our team that's doing the strategic bike plan. Again, there are no bike recommendations as part of this study. We didn't want to get ahead of their work. And as we're currently proposing it, converting these streets to one-way would not result in any changes to existing parking supply on these streets. This
Thank you. Another quick one. Is there a long-term plan to make the paint or flex post bump outs permanent?
This study is only looking at kind of quick build things, but I know that we do have a citywide program where we are looking at locations. I would say locations that have kind of already been there for a while. We are looking at something called kind of hardening the intersection, or making those actually moving the curb lines and doing that construction. None of that is proposed as part of this project, but if there's a location that is functioning well and works well, we could certainly consider it for a future round of that hardening project.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask one more question and then get to David's hand here. From another David in the question and answer, what about the intersection of Whitehurst and M and the traffic flow going east on M Street that blocks the flow to Key Bridge? Is that something that the project is considered?
We don't have a recommendation at that specific location. Otherwise, we would have presented one. I think there is something in the, that's 33rd and 34th. But again, I think, this project, looking at the congestion that's here in the circulation, this project did make a number of recommendations at intersections. But again, if there is something that you think is missing, that you think we should take another look at, or again, a recommendation that we missed, certainly let us know, and we we'll consider all those comments.
Excellent, thank you. David, thanks for your patience. I'm going to ask you to come off mute here and share your question.
Said, really appreciate this. You guys taking time at night to go through this with the community is great too. So thanks for that. I agree with Mark's earlier point on one-ways, north and south are good and will potentially help alleviate getting in and out for residents and people visiting shops. I am concerned with how the proposal with 28th is, and the 28th northbound one way. And the reason for that is you're just going to have people coming from east on the city wanting to go north up Wisconsin, and having that be a one way right when they're entering Georgetown, I feel like will really encourage people, especially if they hit a red light, to go up that one way, which already happens, to be clear, maybe would be the counterpoint to that, but I think it'll happen, more so. So it'll increase traffic in the residential streets. So my suggestion for thought would be, I do like one ways, and if you had that one way on 28th going south, that would help alleviate the congestion that's on 28th. The other thing you could do with that is there's a right turn lane right now on 28th going so that you can go north on it. You could turn that into parking because that is a congested, other people have made the comment, double parking area. There's a lot of loading into those, George's and other restaurants in that area. So like you could either make that a loading zone or something else just to kind of help alleviate spots there. And then, if I would still be good with another one-way going north, perhaps I would suggest on like 31st or something like that, so that by that time, if you're a driver and you're trying to go over to Wisconsin, you're probably just going to keep going as opposed to turning right away on one of the earlier streets to try to avoid lights. Those are my thoughts. And I guess the last thing I would just say, if we are going to do it on 28th and you do end up doing a one-way there in a 29th south, I mean, it would be good. People have commented on it before, but just speed control, bumps, cameras, stop sign cameras as well.
Thanks for that. I mean, again, with all of these, if there is, things to consider as far as, we should switch how we're thinking about this or make sure we're adding components. Those are great comments and things that we'll certainly consider as we look to refine these. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, David. We appreciate it. All right, a couple more questions from the Q&A. Ahmed asked, and this is, I think, related to David's point, with regards to making 28th Street one-way northbound, will the northbound side still have no parking? Any idea if there are plans for a bike lane on this one-way street?
Again, these recommendations, or the recommendation for 28th and 29th wouldn't make any changes to existing parking. So if there's a location that doesn't have parking, this wouldn't add it. And if there's a location that has parking now, this wouldn't take it away. As far as including bike lanes on these streets, we wouldn't want to get ahead of our active transportation team that's working on the strategic bike lane plan. So we'd want to make sure we're coordinating with them, who again are doing that, citywide look at the network.
Thank you. All right, here's one about mobility. Why aren't the mobility priority networks from Move DC, which went through years of public engagement and are DDOT's long-term plan, reflected in this plan?
I mean, we certainly reviewed when we, did existing conditions for this project. We looked at previous studies and previous efforts and previous, citywide Move DC, Sustainable DC. So we looked at that kind of all at the beginning of this project. If there's a specific thing that you see as inconsistency or a question about, you're welcome to reach out to me. I will provide my contact information in the chat for everyone if you have follow-up questions for me. But yeah, we looked at Move DC for this project.
Thanks, Ted. All right, here's a good one from Melissa. So if these recommendations ultimately conflict with bus priority or bike plans, such as additional parking on M Street, what takes precedence?
I mean, we've already coordinated with all of our DDOT subject matter experts on including the bus and the bike teams, both of which have a representative on the call today. So we've coordinated with them. We'll continue to coordinate with them. So if there's any concerns about that, we'll work through that before anything is implemented.
Thank you. I've got a couple more here. So from Yogan, flex posts are useful, but can constrict already narrow lanes. Can we provide a visual top-down mock-up of how flex posts or curb extensions impact P and 28th and Olive and 28th? So is there a way to visualize that?
Yeah, so we are, one of the things that we're going to be working on between now and when we have the final public meeting for this project is working on renderings for all of these recommendations so that residents can see what these things will look like. So we will be providing that at the next round of during the next round of public meetings.
All right. Thank you, Ted. I know we've got more questions in the Q&A, but I want to call on Mark here. So Mark, if you want to come off mute.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate the comment of the earlier speaker regarding one way on 28th and 29th Street. And sorry, I previously got the streets wrong. I was saying 29th and 30th. I think he's got a good point. If we are doing one way, better to go south on 29th. I'm sorry, better to go north on 29th to discourage a little bit more traffic up there by people seeking to avoid Wisconsin and M Street when they are transiting from downtown up to upper northwest DC. But I can tell you, as one who lives on R Street near 30th, that this this workaround has long been well discovered by DC motorists. And we get traffic on R Street every late afternoon. So frankly, I don't think that turning either 28th or 29th into one-way streets would make that much of a difference, because they are already the preferred route along with R Street for folks seeking that workaround. But at the margins, I agree. I think that if you made 29th Street rather than 30th, rather than 28th, the northbound road, it might, at the margins, discourage some traffic. But I still endorse fully making both of those streets, whichever you choose between them, north or south, one-way streets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Elizabeth, can I call on you here?
Me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you. I want to reiterate what everybody else said. Just thanks for your hard work on this. Really appreciate it. I'm wondering, Ted, if I can specifically ask you about the flex posts.
Yeah.
I think you read a comment that said many of these are sort of cheap. They get run over. There are many of them in a state of disrepair. And you said, well, there's some places where they work. I mean, it sort of seemed to me that you were admitting that they do sort of tend to get run over and look shabby, but sometimes they can work. And I'm wondering if you have any data, if DDOT collects any data about the flex posts, how many you have, how frequently they're repaired, whether they stay up, what you do. I mean, anecdotally, I know what I know driving around, but I'm wondering if you have data.
I don't have any at hand at the moment, and I can check with our performance team or to see. But as far as this project, I know that we have heard previous concerns about the aesthetics of flex posts, both in Georgetown and in other neighborhoods. So as far as all these recommendations, I know a number of them have flex posts in them as recommendations, but through coordinating with the community, if we're happy to do is, we're happy to, if there's real, concern or dislike about flex posts at a location, we're happy to implement something without flex posts at first, and then, just do the signs and the markings or whatever else the recommendation calls for. If that improves the issue, then, that's great. If it turns out that that's not working, then maybe at that point we can, with the community, working with the community, maybe consider flex posts at that point. So we're happy to, like, you can go to a sandwich shop and order your sandwich without mayo. You can, we're happy to consider some of these without flex posts.
Ted, as a quick follow-up, I was driving today and I saw in front of the Georgetown Day School in Upper Northwest, which I think was that street was coordinated between DDOT and GDS, and they put in these beautiful steel planters. Does DDOT do anything like that isn't a flex post, but that is something that actually contributes to the environment and looks attractive and is, I know DDOT doesn't have tons of money, and I certainly know that the mayor's budget presented a lot of problems for this, but is there any collaboration that you have within communities to do something that isn't sort of cheap and junky, but more kind of attractive and, improving on the neighborhood while also protecting pedestrians and scooter riders and bikers?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was going to be my very next comment. We are looking at some kind of more aesthetic alternatives to flex posts, whether it's a big planter or something else. And that's something that we're happy to continue conversations with residents about. I think if there is one issue we have with large planters, and one box we need to check is if we do a large planter, DDOT wouldn't maintain the flowers. So we'd want to work with a community partner to do that. But yeah, that is something that we have had conversations about, and we can continue to have conversations with residents as about that specific piece as we implement things. So thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Couple more here from the Q&A. So Sarah asked a number of questions. I'm going to get through a few of them here. So this is a great one. What's the timing for implementation of both categories of projects, short-term safety and circulation recommendations?
Yeah, I think it depends on the project. The shorter term recommendations are all things we can, shorter term. The circulation, it takes a little bit longer, mainly because we anticipate that those are ones that are going to need a little bit more communication with residents, because it's not just one intersection, it's multiple blocks. But as far as the materials would be the same as far as implementing the circulation improvements. But we're not going to be implementing these things. The study, our last meetings will be next month, and the study will close in June. And July 1st, we're not going to go and implement everything, especially things where we have a lot of concerns, or concerns with residents that we're still working through, or additional things that we hear, and we want to make sure that we're taking the time to do that before anything is implemented. We're not going to be able to meet every request that we get. We're not going to make every single person happy with what we do. That's just not possible with everything. But we do want to make sure we're working through the concerns that we hear on these recommendations. So we want to take the time to do that. But one of the questions in the survey, and I'm glad you asked it because I'm going to plug the survey again. The survey, one of the questions here is we're asking you to choose up to 3 of the recommendations. If there's some of these recommendations that you think, what, I really support it, or I really think that that's going to make a big improvement for safety or a big improvement in my neighborhood, you can prioritize up to 3 of the recommendations, and we'll use that as input as far as which of the recommendations we kind of move forward on after the study. So that's the question that's there as well.
Thank you, Ted. And I know we're getting close on time here, and I just want to note that we have recorded every single comment that's been in here. So even if you haven't asked a question and you've shared an opinion, we have recorded all of this. We've also recorded the meeting, so that will be available to you. You'll have the slides available. Sarah also asked a question on here about looking at a map of where the recommendations are. That's located on the Project Study website. If you scan the QR code to pull up the survey, there are many links to the draft recommendations, so you can see that map. Another quick one here, Ted, hopefully, is how does the study coordinate with bike lane plans and with Rock Creek's study plans to remove one-way traffic patterns?
As far as bike lane, again, our bike team is going to be doing their strategic bikeway update, or their strategic citywide plan. So we've shared these recommendations with them. They've reviewed them. And we have, again, a member of the team who's on the call. So we'll continue to work with them. As far as Rock Creek Parkway, I assume that you're asking about the NPS project. If there's another project that you're thinking of, let us know. But we have shared these recommendations with the Park Service, and we're happy to continue coordination with them.
Thanks, Ted. And Sarah just raised her hand here, so I'm going to bring her off mute to maybe clarify her question. Sarah, if you come off mute there.
Can you hear me?
We can
Yeah.
hear you. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again for this, and sorry about my text typos. I didn't realize this was going to be so short a text block. So I think a fundamental question that I raised last night is we're presented these projects in isolation. They're each numbered. It acts as though they're individual and don't have impacts on each other. And so I would like to submit more general comments. I just filled out the survey today, and there is not room to do that. And it's not very conducive to providing an overarching set of comments. And so I'm just wondering if you can give us information on where to submit that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There should be a question that that asks if there's anything else that you'd like to go to ask the project team. There is a space for that, so I think that's probably the best place to provide that type of comment.
It was limited space.
Okay. If you have more, if there's more that you need to that you would like to provide, you're welcome to send me an email. And I dropped my contact info earlier in the chat.
Thank you.
But yeah, I'm happy to follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Okay, a few more questions here in the chat from Colin regarding Olive and 28th. Is there a reason that there are only 2 crosswalks at this intersection? On Google Maps, it shows in 2018 that there were actually 4 crosswalks. And could adding these crosswalks be included in the plan?
Yeah. So the maps we used for these boards or these materials are pretty recent. But if there's some, thing that's been updated, or if where we zoomed in hasn't been updated, I apologize for that, and thank you for bringing that up. But anywhere where we're happy to consider additional crosswalks in any of these recommendations. And in a number of these recommendations, we did call out, adding a crosswalk somewhere. But again, if you think that we need to be adding a crosswalk or, adding that to a recommendation that doesn't have it, please provide that comment, and we're happy to consider it.
Thanks, Ted. Okay, let me see here. Okay, how about this? What's the assessment of the projected commuter traffic volume if 28th and 29th are made one-way thoroughfare streets?
Yeah, so we did do analysis on that recommendation. And if I could ask Daniel from our team who did the analysis on this. Daniel, if you're able to
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I don't know if I look so great on video, but yeah, so as far as the volumes, we took counts on 28th Street to understand what the current traffic patterns were. And it did demonstrate that there is a propensity for northbound traffic flow as opposed to southbound on that corridor specifically. So I think it was in the range of 80% versus 20% in directional split north versus south. Regarding your question about projected traffic volumes, this study did not look at that. It would be something we would have to evaluate further if we decide to carry this recommendation forward. So unfortunately, I can't speculate on any type of traffic volume projection at this time.
Right, thank you. Let's see, I want to make sure I'm getting these in order.
Christian,
Yeah.
before you move on, I just want to reiterate that any concerns like that, we'll be working through them both through the study, and then if there are concerns that remain, we're happy to continue working with residents on that. So
Great. Thanks, Ted. Okay, from Marie, did you look at the intersection where P Street intersects with the Rock Creek Parkway on-off ramp near the end of Rose Park? I used to live across the street from that. The intersection is so dangerous. Drivers go there too fast coming off the highway and over the pedestrian bridge, and they aren't looking for pedestrians.
I mean, we don't have a recommendation for that location. So again, if you think we missed something, there's a question in the survey where you can ask that, and we're happy to consider all of those. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, from Emmy, was any consideration given to pedestrians being compelled to use the streetery extensions and walk closest to the street traffic walk closest to street traffic because the restaurant is utilizing the actual sidewalk as part of his business service area.
So the sidewalk extensions, as far as assessing those for changes, was not something that we. I mean, we did look at. There is one where we made a recommendation to push back one of the streeteries to improve visibility. But I know that all those sidewalk extensions are part of a permit that the bid is managing through an effort that's separate from this study. So if there are concerns with any of those installations, I'd recommend that you follow up with them and they coordinate with us on that. So with us meaning DDOT, not necessarily the study team, but if there are concerns, we're happy to work with the bid and you to address those. So
thanks, Ted.
Meaning DDOT, of course, we're happy to.
Right. And Ted, I want to be respectful of people's time, especially considering that they're giving up their evenings to be here. We have a few more questions in the Q&A. Should we try to make it through those, or should folks get in touch with you directly?
I'm happy to keep going.
Okay, great. So from Gwen, Gwen noted that 28th and M Street illegal parking by food delivery and pickup is causing significant congestion. So DDOT has been asked to fix this, so we'll add this comment for review. Thank you, Gwen. Caleb said converting 28th and 29th will make them more attractive. Whoops, I lost that message. Sorry, just bounced down. Sorry, my whole screen just scrolled down. Converting 28th and 29th will make them more attractive alternatives for commuters trying to bypass M Street. That will bring more traffic off the main street and onto the smaller streets, which will materially increase overall traffic. Are there ways to restrict commuters and provide some of the benefit that's being targeted for residents and shoppers? Bike lanes, speed bumps, make cross traffic illegal. Don't know if that's possible.
I mean, again, I think we've mentioned if there are things that this recommendation specifically or other recommendations that, you know, if you think we really need to make sure we're including speed humps into this recommendation or, you know, contraflow bike lanes or whatever, you can certainly make that comment and we'll work with the teams that are specialists on those to review those comments. So,
yep.
So thank you. Yep.
Very good. Okay, and I just want to say we very much appreciate all the comments that are in the Q&A. So in the interest of time, we're reading all of them, but I'm going to ask the last couple of questions here. So Ted, once recommendations are implemented, what's DDOT's process to understand efficacy? And would there be sorry, I'll ask the second part of that too. Would there be an avenue for modification based on data or public feedback after that?
Yeah, I mean, if something is implemented, you know, we like to let something sit for a bit while traffic patterns adjust around that. So, you know, if a driver is not in that location, you know, frequently, and they see something that's different, we kind of let a couple of months go by after implementing something. You know, we don't want to keep constantly going back after. So we let things settle for a couple of months. I mean, if there's a serious concern, then we're happy to come back. But generally, after we implement something, we want to wait for a couple of months. And then if there are still concerns, we're happy to come back out in the community and see what's going on. So yeah.
All right, thank you. From Gwen, can bike lanes still be added to M if the barn stance is added?
I mean, the barn stance, or again, the pedestrian only phase at M and Wisconsin is something that has gone through analysis and will need to continue to go through analysis, and it will be looked at further as part of the bus priority project, which is coming later this year or early next year. And you know, that project, again, just because it's bus, it could make other improvements for other transportation modes as well. And our bike team will certainly be a key player in that project and looking at that intersection. So So they will be involved.
All right. I have one more question for you, Ted, and then I see Mark's hand. So Mark, you will get the final question of the evening. But from Jane, regarding the 28th and 29th one-way proposals, why do you want to make it easier for drivers to pass through these streets? Shouldn't drivers be discouraged from using these streets as cut-throughs?
Yeah, so we are recommending this, or this is a draft recommendation based on the analysis that we have done, which Daniel described earlier in the meeting. But again, we have heard some concerns from some residents that doing this would make things less safe, and those would outweigh any circulation improvements that would make. And those are concerns that we certainly take seriously. And this is when I say that we're going to be making sure that we're looking at all the comments. I would think that the meeting yesterday, this recommendation is probably the one that we got the most amount of comments on. So this is one that we are going to be taking a careful look at as far as refining and making sure that what comes out of this study reflects all of the comments and incorporates all the comments that we get as much as possible. So we definitely want to hear from the public and from residents on this one, but I mean, of course, on all of them where you have a concern. So thank you.
Great. And I want to say thank you to Susan for your comment about scooters blocking you. That's certainly something we're concerned about. And Eli, thank you for raising the historic nature of Georgetown, because that's a key focus of the study as well. So Mark, I will unmute you here and give you the final question.
Okay. Well, it's a comment. In fact, I'm back, I'm afraid, on my hobby horse, advocating one-way streets for 28th and 29th. I understand the concern of the person who called in recently regarding the fear that their conversion to one-way streets would increase traffic by those seeking to bypass Wisconsin and M Street. But I can really assure you, having lived on R Street for the last 30 years, that any DC motorist who has been in our fair city for more than a few months already knows that 28th Street or 29th and then R Street are a time-efficient way when you're getting home in the late afternoon to reach Upper Northwest from downtown. They are not unknown, and they are heavily used already. So I think that their capacity has probably already been achieved in terms of the potential for more motorists using them. I think that if they were changed to one-way streets from two-way streets, it wouldn't make any difference, because they already, even as two-way streets, are advantageous for motorists seeking that route. So I think that I think they are already as heavily traveled as they're ever likely to be.
Okay.
Thank you. And thanks for holding such a civilized discussion. I'm glad, but I'm really sorry that our moderator at the beginning had to urge everybody to be kind and be civil. We shouldn't have to do this in this day and age, but I'm afraid we do. And it's been a delight to be a participant in a discussion that has been conducted as neighbors, concerned citizens, and with a certain politeness and respect for other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That is a wonderful note to end on. And we very much appreciate all of you for being so thoughtful and respectful too. It takes all of us to make a happier world. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your advocacy. All right, Ted, I will turn it back to you to close us out.
All right. Thank you all for your comments and questions today, and the great discussion. And again, I should note that this is not the only.
About 3 minutes. Bye.
This is not the only opportunity for that, and we want to continue to have these conversations. So I'm going to plug it one more time. The survey, we really do want to hear from as many people as possible, so that can be accessed here. You can also go to our website for the project, engage. And I'm going to type that in now, engage.dc.gov. Georgetown study. We will be sending out, we'll be posting all the materials from the meeting today and from our in-person meeting yesterday on that website. Our DDOT YouTube channel will be we'll be posting the recording from this meeting to that. And then we'll have a link to that on the website as well. And then also on the website, there is an opportunity for, if you're not on our email list already, you can sign up on that website and give us your email address. We'll make sure that you get all that information. We're going to send an email out. We're going to be posting it on the website, posting the recording on a YouTube page, and then also sending an email out to our list, making sure that they know that the website is updated and all that stuff is on there. And we'll have all of that before the end of the week. So thank you all. Again, this is we're closing the meeting, but we are certainly not closing conversations with all of you, and we look forward to hearing from you more. So thank you all for your time, and have a wonderful evening.